I had planned on doing a video today on dialing in a hunting rifle. So I carried this old Parker Hale Lee Enfield conversion chambered in 303 British out to the range yesterday. We'll just say things didn't go according to plan. I had issues. So let's take a look at what I had going on. I fired my first shot. It was a foresight shot just to get on paper. And sure enough, I hit the paper. That's a good start. Now let's look at the second shot. Yeah, just a little far right there, isn't it? Third shot. Fourth shot wasn't even on paper. Okay, so that's not a good sign because I did not make any windage adjustments to the scope from the first shot to the second shot. The only thing I changed was elevation. Yeah, that's not a good way to start. And then it just went downhill from there. And if we look here at the end, the last two shots, okay, we got one on the far right edge really high, and we got one on the far left edge really high. We got something going on, and it ain't good. So rather than doing a video today on dialing in your hunting rifle, we're going to do a video today on troubleshooting scopes. Some of you will remember this rifle from last year. I was fortunate enough to get it right before hunting season. I was really excited about it, and then I was even more fortunate to be able to find the rings for it. These are a special proprietary rings made by Parker Hale, and we'll just say you don't run across these every day. Well, I got the rings in, and literally days before hunting season, the day before opening day, I'm at the range trying to zero the scope because I really wanted to hunt with this rifle last year. Ran into some problems then, which is why I was doing the video, or wanting to do the video on dialing in your hunting rifle right now. The point was, don't wait till the last second to set up a hunting rifle. And I didn't want to wait till the last second again. So I thought we'd go ahead and get out there now, zero the rifle, and just a good little reminder for a lot of you, don't wait. You know, if you've got a rifle that needs setting up, zeroing, all that good stuff, get out there now if you can. Especially keep this in mind, with all of the shortages, ammo shortages, supply chain issues, if you run into problems and you waited to the last second, it could seriously end up being a problem. You might not be able to just get whatever you need. So yeah, I thought, hey, let's go on and get this one dialed in then. Well, when I had problems before, my point of impact just jumped all over the place on me, and by the end, I wasn't even on paper. So I knew we had an issue. The first thing I did was change the scope. And I checked to make sure I didn't see anything obvious going on with the bases, you know, anything loose, and everything appeared to be tight. Went ahead and changed scopes. I had this Redfield 2x7 on there. 2x7 just seemed perfect for this rifle and what I wanted to do with it. Well, I put a Redfield 4x12 on here. I know this 4x12 is a good scope. I had just gotten this 2x7. I did not know that it was a good scope. And sometimes we run into problems with our scopes. And quite a few of you in the comments then commented on not liking the Redfields, and I should have got a loophole. Well, just a little information here. These Redfields were made by Loophole. That's right, Loophole bought Redfield. And then in 2020, they quietly sold off Redfield, and I think Dick's Sporting Goods owns the name now, and they were bringing in some scopes from China or something. Redfield's dead at this point, but these are good scopes. They remind me of the VX2, so I have a lot of confidence in the scopes, have quite a few of them. All right, changed scopes, went back to the range yesterday, thought that was going to take care of our issues. I was hoping. Well, it didn't. So we need to troubleshoot this and see what's going on. And I thought this would be a good time just to go through the troubleshooting process and what all to look at on a rifle scopes, rings, bases, all of that good stuff. And changing the scope, that's just the obvious, easy place to start if you have an extra scope on hand. That's a simple, we can eliminate that quickly just by changing scopes. If it's all over the place, you change your scopes, you go back out and all of a sudden you're shooting nice tight groups, it was probably the scope. Right. In this case, we know it's not the scope. So let's take a look at another old rifle of mine, and I think this is going to be a good example of some things to look for. This is an FN49 or an SAFN49, and this particular one's chambered in 7mm Mauser, 7x57. And this was my second rifle I ever owned. This was also my introduction into troubleshooting scope problems. And keep in mind, okay, I got this when I was 13, somewhere around there for Christmas, and we didn't have the internet back then. So there were so many things that we just did not know, and if you wanted to learn something, you either talked to someone firsthand that had knowledge of whatever, or you found a book. Well, I didn't even know enough then to know that there were books on such things, and much less where to even begin to look for such a book. So I went into this rifle not knowing anything except for that I wanted a scope on it, and that's because I didn't shoot the iron sights particularly well on this rifle. Well, now with so much knowledge and me having learned over the years, and the reason I didn't shoot the iron sights very well is because the rear sight on this particular rifle was an aperture sight, a peep sight. At some point, someone had cut it in half and turned it into just a bottom U. Yeah, that wasn't good. But anyway, I could shoot it okay, but considering what they had done. So I wanted a scope on it. And with this particular rifle, there was and still is an aftermarket scope base for this rifle. And the way it works is this rear sight here, it pulls out. You push it down and the whole thing slides out, and then that aftermarket base mounts into where this went. So no machining involved. And my father bought me one, and I had a 4x32 scope at the time. And so they got me rings. We put that on this rifle. Well, I started shooting it, and I had a lot of problems. I couldn't hold zero with that. It's all over the place. Well, that was one of those I just had to figure out what was going on, and that's why I wanted to show this rifle, because a lot of times with mounts and bases and scopes, there's no, this is what's going on. It's you just have to look at it and think about it and figure out what's going on, especially if you're fooling with some type of older rifle or just something that's not standard. Okay, well, in this instance, I thought about it, and okay, I realized what this rear sight mounts to and what the base was mounting to is actually a dust cover. This whole piece slides up and off. So there's movement here. That's not good. And then the aftermarket base for this rifle is made out of aluminum. It was literally flexing. Well, that wasn't good either. Plus, with where that aftermarket base positioned the scope over the receiver here, spent brass would come up and it would hit the scope. And it would literally knock the scope off, I don't know, about an inch or so. Every time you fired a shot, the scope, it'd be off an inch. Ended up costing me a really big deal because I tried to make it work. That was my big lesson at 14 on don't try to make stuff work, get it right. And I knew that wasn't right. I was just trying to make it work. It was what I had, and I didn't know any better. I thought about that. I thought about it for a long time afterwards, and just the figuring out part, and I realized that's not good to have it mounted to this cover. So I always thought the best way to go with this rifle would be to mount it to the receiver. That's the only way it's ever going to be especially solid. Well, then along comes the internet, and I can do some research and find out some things, and Turns out that they actually made a scope mount, military scope mount, for this rifle, for the sniper versions, and any of the rifles that had a dovetail machined into the receiver, you could mount this base with these rings to it. And then eventually I found one. They're, we'll just say, hard to find. Well, that made perfect sense when I finally realized that and found it. I was thinking of drilling into the side of this, into the receiver, and mounting a side mount on here, drilling and tapping it. But then eventually just talked myself out of that, and fortunately I did. So I didn't go permanently modifying this receiver. But that's the thing, is look at what's going on with your rifle. What is the base mounting to? Is it mounting directly to the receiver? How solid is it? And that's why I'm not a big fan of a lot of the scout bases and so forth. They're mounting to the barrel. If it's a really good solid attachment to the barrel, I get that that could be a really solid setup, but then you're getting into a lot of harmonics and so forth that you're just not going to get with the receiver, which most of your scout rifles, you're not. Accuracy's not critical on those. And you go into it knowing if you're setting up a scout rifle with a scope mounted really far forward that, you know, it's not going to be a long range precision rifle. Well, that's one of the reasons I believe it's not that you can't get a rifle where the scope mounts directly to the barrel to shoot accurately. Ruger number ones, single shots. There is no receiver to speak of. The scope literally mounts to the barrel. But those rifles can be extremely finicky to get them to shoot. I happen to have one that's a tack driver, but I've heard enough stories from people I trust that I know they're finicky. Well, I think that being finicky has a lot to do with the harmonics and them the scope being mounted directly to the barrel. Right, so what are you mounting to with your bases? And then you can get into, okay, how are the rings fitting on the bases? You know, just really thinking about all of that and how solid all of that is, where are the weaknesses and so forth. And that's how you troubleshoot a scope and the base and rings, just thinking about it and just going through your head, what's going on here? So with all of that in mind, let's take a look at this rifle and see if we can't figure out what's going on here. Okay, first thing, are we getting movement? And actually we are. If I wiggle the scope, just a little pressure, getting movement there. A little bit up and down, but a good bit side to side. Okay, it's not good. All right, so where's the movement coming from? Well, it's not the base. I checked the base, and this particular rifle, it was a military rifle. It was a Lee Enfield 303 British, converted to a sporting rifle by Parker Hale. And they created a proprietary base and rings for this rifle. And it bolts to the receiver or screws to it in 3 places. That's solid. Okay, what about the rings? Well, the rings are solid. And if I look closely at this, I can see movement and the piece that the rings bolt to, the base that they're bolting to. All right, so we've got something going on in there between where it mounts to the receiver and the rings. So let's pop this off of here. And I'm going to go ahead and change back to the other scope since we're going to have everything apart. So let's pull this scope off. And sure enough, there's a separate base in here that the rings mount to, and then that base screws to the base that bolts to the receiver. That's where our movement's coming from. I checked this originally. When I mounted the very first scope on this rifle, everything looked solid. I didn't see any issues. And I think what happened is that first time out, after a few shots, it loosened up. And then this last time, it really started loosening up. So let's see what we have here. That screw's loose. The front and the back screws are loose. All right, that is certainly not good there. All right, but we know what our issue is. We found it. Now, how to fix this. All right, and then this is getting into the topic everybody loves to talk about with scopes. Well, there's two topics everybody loves to talk about. Torque and Loctite. All right, we're going to talk about Loctite now. I normally do not use Loctite. I don't think it's needed. But there are instances where I do use it. And all right, this base here. This base is from the 1903 A3 that I'm working on. The sniper rifles, American sniper rifle in World War II was the 1903 A4. And this is the exact, not the exact, but this is the red filled base that they used on those rifles. Those rifles and scopes and bases, the bases were famous for coming loose out in the field because they only had 2 screws in the base. And these screws, again, they were famous for coming loose. I was already planning to put Loctite on this one when I put it back together on the 1903. Well, if we look at this Parker Hale here, it also has 2 rather large screws on it instead of multiple fine screws or fine. I'm sure it's machine threads in here, but for a standard base on a standard rifle, they use really fine threads. And these are fine threads. Looks to be about an 8/32, just guessing. Maybe a little larger. But usually bases on standard bolt action rifles, you've got 2 screws per base. So that's 4 screws. And with those fine threads, when they're locked in there, they're not going anywhere. And we just had a piece fall out of there that I do believe was a washer. Let's see if I can't find that. And yes, there is a lock washer on the back thread. I do not see one on the front. It is stuck inside the base here, so it is there. Okay, so that was apparently something they were concerned about because you don't normally see a lock washer for your screws in a base. So now we're going to apply just a little Loctite to the thread. Place this back on here. That should have us. And for the Loctite, I used blue Loctite. I hear a lot of discussion about different types of Loctite. Look up whatever Loctite you're going to use. I mean, if you're just going out and looking for Loctite, I've heard that the purple Loctite's good, which is Loctite 222. The blue, I know it works, it's 242. But I've heard a lot of people say, never use the red. The red's permanent. Well, Loctite has a lot of different formulas. And there are some reds that you can use, some you can't. Look up the Loctite you're going to use. They have a lot of different variations of this product. And for this, 242 is removable. All right, so that's locked into place. Now we can mount the scope back on here, and I think we're good this time. Now for the rings, I'm not going to use Loctite. I didn't have an issue with them. They're smaller screws. I don't think it's ever going to be an issue. Now, if I have problems in the future, hey, we'll add Loctite. But again, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think we got it this time. I don't know yet, but we will find out for certain this coming week. I would take it to the range right now and we would check it and see, but it just started raining. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm glad to get the rain. So we'll get to the range next week. And what I was planning on doing for today, dialing in a hunting rifle, we're going to go through that process next week. We'll go through the process of trying 3 different types of ammunition to see which one gives us our best accuracy. We'll go through again. I've got the velocities from before, but I want to recheck one of those. So we'll recheck our velocities, and then we'll make a decision on what cartridge we're going to hunt with. We'll take that data, we'll get our maximum point blank range using a maximum point blank range calculator. Then we'll set our scope so that our 0 gives us our best possible maximum point blank range, which for this rifle is probably going to be about 250 yards. And then that means we can just hold the crosshairs on the target and hit what we're shooting at within a 6-inch circle out to 250 yards, and that's taking out a deer every time. And we might even discuss velocity versus ballistic coefficient here shortly, because there's a lot of different thoughts on that now, and I don't think a lot of people really understand that. So that's what we're going to hopefully do, Lord willing, this coming week. And now for some channel stuff. And the rain is definitely here. Okay, real quick, just a little house cleaning on channel stuff. I mentioned the other week that I started a second channel. All right, I just posted the second video to that channel, and I'll leave a link below to that video in the description, and the reason for starting the second channel. That's going to let us focus more on hunting and firearms on this channel, for those of you that are just interested in firearms and hunting. And then for the second channel, we're going to focus on the gardening, fishing, saving money, living simple. Hence that channel's Living Simple with Tom. This one's Simple Living. Okay, I think that's going to be a good thing long term. We'll just have to try it and see. With that said, I didn't get a video posted to this channel last week, and I try to post every Sunday. I don't know how this is going to work out, having 2 channels, as far as for me with having enough time to make enough videos. I'm just going to have to try it and see. But even with just this channel by itself, though, with projects, I never know how a project's going to turn out, and I'm always subject to run into something, as y'all are going to find out very soon on another project we're working on this channel. I just ran into some issues on it. So, but we'll get into all that then. But we have a lot of fun things planned that I really think y'all are going to enjoy on both channels. And if you're just interested in the firearms and hunting, well, hey, we're going to cover that here. Well, I think that about covered it for channel news. God bless, and y'all have a wonderful day and a wonderful week.